Hey everyone, I hope you are all doing great. My name is Steve, and today I want to shed some light on a topic you may not have heard much about. Of course, you have definitely heard of vaccines, and I know the vast majority of you have one, but I want to specifically talk about a vaccine that is not yet required to enter a college or university. Many vaccines, like the ones that protect against measles, mumps, rubella, and hepatitis B, are required to attend a majority of institutions across the U.S. The requirement of vaccines is especially vital in this setting because if you have ever lived in a dorm, you know how close you get with your roommates. By getting these vaccines, you not only protect yourself, but everyone around you. Let's take a step back and look at the history of vaccines. If you are not a fan of history, I will be sure to make this quick. The first ever recorded form of a vaccine comes from a curious man named Edward Jenner in the late 1700s. Jenner had witnessed some promise using dried boils from sick patients to activate the immune system of healthy patients in the treatment of smallpox. The only problem was, it worked a few times out of many. So, he decided to take a leap of faith and begin researching a new and improved method. In his search, he noticed something very odd. Everyone was becoming ill around him, except for a group of women. Upon further investigation, he noticed that all of these women had the same occupation, milking calves. He decided to dedicate all of his time into finding out why these women were special, and what he found would be an incredible breakthrough that would eventually lead to the modern-day vaccine. You see, these women would get sick, but not with smallpox. Cows carry a similar virus known ironically as cowpox. The women would get the cowpox, which is a less dangerous disease to humans, and become immune to smallpox. To further test this thought, he did something a tad bit unethical. He grabbed his gardener's child, broke his skin with a few scratches, and rubbed some cowpox material right in the wound. After this, the boy was then rubbed with a human sample containing smallpox. To Jenner's surprise, the boy was immune. Voila! Science. Anyways, modern-day vaccines are used by many to prevent the spread of dangerous illnesses. Some, like polio, have been completely eradicated in the U.S. As I mentioned before, some vaccines are required to gain entry into a college or university, but one potentially life-threatening disease lacks the attention it deserves in the nation. This disease is known as Meningitis B. Meningitis is an infection in the body that affects your nervous system. It can be caused by a number of things, including viruses, fungi, parasites, and certain injuries or illnesses. However, Meningitis B is caused by a bacteria known as Neisseria meningitidis. Meningitis caused by a bacteria is known as meningococcal disease. There are 12 slightly different kinds of this bacteria, but only 5 that are most common cause of infection: A, B, C, W, and Y. In order to attend colleges or universities across the U.S., you are required to get the vaccine that protects you from groups A, C, W, and Y, but not B. Before we talk about that, let's get an idea of what this disease and its vaccine is all about. The disease itself has symptoms that range in severity from a slight fever and headache to seizures and vomiting. If left untreated, someone who has meningococcal disease can suffer from organ failure and death due to sepsis, or bacteria in the blood. If not treated fast enough, they may be left with permanent nerve damage, such as hearing loss, blindness, and seizures. For those who are not treated right away, there is a 10 to 15% chance at death. The bacteria itself can be spread from human to human via the sharing of saliva. This can range from kissing, coughing, sharing of drinks, and living in close proximity with someone who is infected. The bacteria can be found in every continent but Antarctica, and it is most prevalent in the US, Europe, and Australia, as well as some parts of Asia. Now you may be thinking, if this disease is so dangerous, why have I not heard much about it? Well, there are only 200 cases in the US per year. Of these 200 cases, around 20 people have died, and 40 have either lost their hearing, lost limbs, or suffered neurological damage. Although 200 may not seem like a lot, even a small risk certainly is not worth taking a chance. More about that later. Now I'll talk about the vaccine. The meningitis vaccine that is required for admission into a college or university protects against the 4 types of bacteria A, C, W, and Y, and is most commonly taken between ages 11 and 12 and every 5 years after that. This combined vaccine is what's known as a conjugate vaccine. This type of vaccine consists of long chains of sugars called polysaccharides, a type of molecule found on the surface of bacteria that can be unique from species to species. These polysaccharides are recognized by your immune cells to make antibodies, the main ingredient that helps your body fight off invaders. The only problem is, polysaccharides by themselves are not strong enough to produce a beneficial immune response. This problem can be fixed by attaching a protein to the polysaccharide that ultimately helps strengthen immune response. The Meningitis B vaccine, however, is what's known as a subunit vaccine. Subunit vaccines are similar to conjugate vaccines, but actually much simpler. Instead of two components, like the conjugate, it only requires the use of a single component, the polysaccharide. In this case, the polysaccharide is able to be recognized by your body's immune cells, which then begin making the antibodies needed to gain immunity. Isolating the necessary components from bacteria themselves has its drawback. The main reason we don't do this is because the amount we can obtain is simply not high enough for mass production. To overcome this problem, scientists do something amazing. They use yeast. And believe it or not, it is the same kind of yeast we use to make bread, beer, and wine. So how does this work? Well, in short, scientists can take the DNA, or the recipe for making the antigens, and insert it into the yeast. The yeast will recognize this recipe and begin following it, producing a massive amount of the antigen. The cells are then broken open, and the antigens are removed to be placed into the vaccine. Hold on, you're telling me that all this vaccine is made of is a bunch of antigens? Well, in order to make sure the vaccine works properly, a few more ingredients must be added. In the US, the most common brand of meningitis B vaccine is called Bexsero. The ingredients are as follows: a mixture of meningitis B antigens, aluminum hydroxide, sodium chloride, histidine, and sucrose. Now I know what you all are thinking. Aluminum what? Sodium who? Well, the ingredients in vaccines have been a common concern for many years, but I'm here to put your mind at ease. First, antigens are the ones that actually create the immune response. They are responsible for building the necessary immunity, and it really wouldn't not be a vaccine without them. The good news is, these antigens do not give you the disease, they simply prepare your body to recognize it. Aluminum hydroxide has been a hot topic of discussion in vaccines ever since it was first used in the 1930s. Aluminum hydroxide is used as what's called an adjuvant. An adjuvant is an ingredient that helps improve the result of the vaccine. Aluminum hydroxide can also be found in antacids, the stuff that helps get rid of that pesky heartburn. The FDA has done extensive tests on aluminum hydroxide, and it has found no evidence of causing any harm. Sodium chloride, although sounding fancy, is just the scientific name for table salt. Apart from making a good meal, sodium chloride is used in vaccines to help keep your cells happy when the vaccine is administered. Histidine, yet another fancy-sounding word, is actually an important amino acid for your body's function. It can be found in a wide variety of food like fish, eggs, meat, and whole grains. In the vaccine, it is used as a stabilizer to keep the active ingredients safe during storage and transport. Once again, we face another fancy-schmancy word, sucrose. Sucrose is just the name for sugar. Yep, the stuff that you put in your morning coffee or taste in a ripe strawberry. Despite its simplicity, it actually serves a very important role. In the vaccine, it protects the antigens from its surrounding environment, like temperature and light. Once you get to know these ingredients, the intimidating chemistry terms used to name them do not seem bad at all. If you still are not convinced, I'd like to share a few stories of first-hand accounts. The National Foundation for Infectious Disease shares a story of a young woman 21 years of age who was rushed to the emergency room with a high fever and neck stiffness. In a half an hour's time, she was crawling on the ground, screaming in pain and agony, while unable to form a single word. Fearing for their daughter's life, her parents felt hopeless. They had no idea what was going on, and doctors told them that it could be meningitis. This concerned them because they felt it wasn't possible. She had been vaccinated. But just as her fever neared 106, doctors diagnosed her with meningitis B. You see, she had been vaccinated, but for the other 4 major groups, never for meningitis B. After 2 weeks in the ICU and another month of recovery, she was left partially deaf and forced to walk with a cane. To this day, she is incredibly lucky to be alive. Another young man at 18 years old named Dash was subject to the harsh reality of meningitis B. He was going to be sent off to school after 4 successful years in high school as a student and a 4-sport athlete. A few weeks before college, he started to feel ill. He was vomiting, had a fever, body aches, and diarrhea. His mother, suspecting a flu, kept him hydrated and gave him some Tylenol. The only problem was, this was much worse than the flu. Dash could barely move his neck, and his fever was rapidly spiking. It was now time for him to head to the emergency room. In the hospital, they ran a laundry list of tests, while Dash's kidneys began to fail and his blood pressure began to drop. After almost 2 days, his mom received the news that her son had a serious case of bacterial meningitis type B. Doctors told his parents that this could be it for their son. This was another case of, how is it possible? My son received the vaccine. Well, yes, he had, but only for types A, C, and W, and Y, leaving out type B. Fortunately, Dash made a full recovery after a week in the hospital and has since never taken life for granted again. So now that you are well versed in the meningitis B vaccine, I encourage you to reflect on the decision to protect yourselves and others. This is especially important if you are sending your child off to school or the one being sent off. Vaccines are proven to be safe and effective and go through tons and tons of testing to prove it. With your help, we can spread the word on this unforgiving illness and help keep everyone safe. Please feel free to like and share this video to your friends and family. And remember, vaccination protects. Thank you.